Something is wrong with this man's head. If you look at the remains recovered from the Sierra Madre Oriental, your brain tries to make sense of the geometry. You expect the natural curve of a human cranium, the familiar arc of the bone that protects the mind. But that isn't what was found in the White Rock Mountains of northeastern Mexico. Instead, you see corners, you see flat plains, you see a skull that has been forced into the shape of a cube. We are looking at a man who died 14 centuries ago, and his existence is currently dismantling the established history of ancient Mesoamerica. He was more than 40 years old when he passed away, but the story of his transformation didn't begin with his death. It began in the cradle. When he was just an infant, while his skull was still soft and malleable, his community began a years-long process of physical intervention. They used rigid boards, they used tight, unyielding bindings. They applied a sustained pressure that forced the growing bone to abandon its natural path. The result is a form that researchers are now calling completely unprecedented for this region. There is a deep mystery here that goes beyond the physical appearance of the bone. This specific type of cubic deformation, what the scientists call a parallelepiped form, doesn't belong in these mountains. Historically, it has only been reported in a few, very distant places. We are talking about sites hundreds of kilometers away. Central Veracruz. The Maya territories to the southeast. These were different cultures, with different gods and different languages. So, how did this radical practice end up in the isolated northern highlands of Tamaulipas? Maybe a group of people migrated across hundreds of miles of dangerous, rugged terrain. Perhaps there was a secret trade network, an exchange of ideas and rituals that we have failed to map. Or, most unsettling of all, maybe this mountain community developed this exact, complex technique entirely on their own, separate from the rest of the world. The official report, Bulletin 628, confirms that this isn't just a strange anomaly. Physical anthropologist Jesus Ernesto Velasco Gonzalez and archaeologist Carlos Vanuez Perez Silva are the ones who identified the finding at a site known as Balcón de Montezuma. If you travel about 18 kilometers from the modern city of Ciudad Victoria, you reach this place. It sits 1,200 meters above sea level, a site of limestone and thin air. There are nearly 100 circular platforms here, built from massive slabs. We used to think these were just simple foundations, but as we look closer at the post holes and the evidence of conical palm thatch roofs, we see something different. This was a planned settlement. The people here invested an incredible amount of labor to integrate their architecture into the mountain summit. They organized their world around two plazas oriented west to east. They weren't just passing through these mountains, they were claiming them. Researchers are now going back through the archives, reviewing skeletal remains that were stored in the 1990s. They are looking for things the previous generation might have missed, and this cube-shaped skull is the most jarring piece of evidence they have found so far. The man lived during the Mesoamerican Classic period, roughly between 400 and 900 CE. This was a time when the great cities of the south were rising, when writing systems were being perfected and trade networks were expanding across the continent. But even in that era of connection, this type of head shaping shouldn't be here. The technical term is tabular superior. It refers to where the compression was applied. The boards were fixed between the lambda, the point where the back of the head meets the top, and the sagittal suture, the seam that runs down the center of the skull. If you apply pressure there for years, the forehead doesn't just slope back. Instead, the entire top of the cranium is forced into a flat, angular plane. It creates a square profile, a cube. This was a choice. A deliberate cultural act that changed the man's facial appearance forever. It changed how he saw the world and how the world saw him. It likely interacted with specific headdresses or ornaments that marked him as someone distinct, someone who didn't look like anyone else in the mountains. We find similar things at a site called El Zapatal in Veracruz. We see it in the Maya region, but those comparisons are complicated. In those distant places, the head often projects upward, gaining height. At Balcón de Montezuma, the shape is lower, it is squatter, it is a more compact, more aggressive geometry. The team needed to know if this man was an outsider. If he was a traveller from the Maya south, the cube would be easy to explain. It would just be a foreign fashion brought to a new place, a simple story of migration. But if he was local, if he was born in these mountains and still had a head shaped like a distant Maya lord, That would mean the history of the Huasteca is far more connected and far more strange than our books allowed. To solve this, they use stable oxygen isotope analysis. This measures the chemical ratios preserved in the tooth enamel. Since enamel forms in childhood, it captures a permanent record of the water and food a person consumed as a child. It is a biological signature of home. They tested the collagen, they tested the bioappetite, they waited for the chemistry to tell them where he came from. The results were definitive. The man was local. He was born in the Sierra Madre. He grew up in those mountains, eating the food and drinking the water of the northern highlands. He lived his 40+ years there, and he died there. He was not a migrant. This changes the stakes of the discovery. It means the cube wasn't just a foreign import. The practice was rooted in the local soil. It suggests a cultural link that spans thousands of kilometers, an invisible thread of ideas moving from the Yucatan all the way up through the Gulf of Mexico, potentially reaching as far as what is now Florida. There is a lot of noise in the media about this find. Some outlets are claiming that DNA testing has confirmed his ancestry, but the official records tell a different story. The INAH bulletin only describes isotope analysis. The DNA work, the genetic truth of who his ancestors were, is still a mystery. If you want to see the latest in bioarchaeology and institutional research, subscribe.